On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks winning streak is over at 5 in what became a pretty frustrating outcome on this Saturday evening. A 19-point second-half lead, a controversial call in the final seconds, and ultimately an ugly result for the Hawks at home against the Hornets. We'll get into all of what transpired in this game and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1395 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Saturday evening, deep into the night here into Sunday to begin a new week on the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Users can have a 100% instant deposit match as a first-time user up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That is prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. I also encourage you to make this podcast, of course, the Locked On Hawks podcast, your first listen each and every day. Check us out across podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And please subscribe and tell a friend today. Today's show is going to be a frustrating one for a lot of Hawks fans. I would imagine at this point in time, the Hawks have won 5 games in a row coming into the night. They were hosting a team that they are better than in the Charlotte Hornets, and the Hawks were up by 19 points in the third quarter. And ultimately, that was not quite enough. The Hawks blew that lead. There was a controversial call, to be sure, in the final seconds that might have cost the Hawks in this game, to be honest with you. But as I will say probably later on as well, the Hawks never should have been in that spot in the first place. When you're playing a team that you're better than at home, yes, it was a back-to-back. I'm sure the Hawks had some tired legs, but certainly not a great performance, kind of a collapse down the stretch. And then at the end of the day, a unlucky result on top of everything else. So we'll get into all of what transpired here, but obviously it's still a good week for the Hawks overall, but this is not a good result on this Saturday evening. So we'll dive into the game now. And the Hawks, by the way, playing a team that was 12-34 coming into the night. Charlotte did have a huge advantage in rest, which I'm sure played some part. You never know ever how much of a part it played, but the Hornets had not played since Wednesday, and the Hawks, of course, had played twice since then. And, challenges, back-to-backs, etc. Also, weirdly, back in October, a long time ago, but if you listen to this podcast then, you might remember the Hawks had a very bad loss at home to the Hornets in October. So 2 of the losses that the Hawks have had that I would say probably maybe they're out of their top 5 or 6 of the season, top/bottom 5 or 6 of the season of worst losses came against Charlotte, and they came in the home building in Atlanta. Injury-wise, the Hawks were shorthanded in this game. Bogdanovich did not play. He was out with right knee injury management. I actually have a quick piece of audio/video to play for you. I asked Emmett Millen about this pregame, sort of the context behind Bogey not playing, what the plan was coming into Friday, into Saturday, and this is what they had to say about Bogey's injury. With Bogey being out tonight, is that a situation where you go into last night knowing you're going to sit him today, or is there a reevaluation on the second night of a back-to-back? How are you sort of managing Bogey and his knee?
Yeah, we have to look at all of that. We look at the game that he is playing, and there's definitely some doubt that he'll play in the back-to-backs. But you don't. You're trying to win that game. And once you get out of that game, then you will monitor where he's at and get a feel for where he's at and if he can go the next night. Our focus last night was he was questionable for last night's game. He felt good in his warm-up and wanted to give it a try. And, we played him. And there was really no restrictions as far as minutes that I had to play him. So the thing was to try to win that game last night and then see how he feels today. And today was a day that felt we needed to sit him down.
Anyway, there you go from Nate, and we'll see if he's available again. Bogdanovich, as the Hawks return to the action on Monday in Chicago. Moving on from there, I should say, Charlotte was also shorthanded. LaMelo Ball, their best player, did not play in this game. Cody Martin was out for the Hornets. Also, Kelly Oubre was out for the Hornets. They did have Gordon Hayward back in this game after an 8-game absence, but still, the Hawks were, even with Bogey out, the healthier team playing at home. I'm going to talk to you about our new friends over at FanDuel later on in the podcast, but I'll just say this. FanDuel made the Hawks a 7.5-point favorite in the game on Saturday, and that was an appropriate number. The Hawks should have been that big or bigger, honestly, favorites in this spot. as for the game itself, the first half was fairly crisp. The Hawks were not perfect in the first half by any means. They were down 5-0 right out of the gate in the first 30 seconds. The Hawks scored the next 7 points. They made 8 of the first 11 shots to kind of restore some order. Dejounte Murray made, I think he had 10 points in the first 7 minutes. He was very good again in this game offensively. There were some ball handling issues along the way, but there's also an awesome layup by Collins with his left hand. Rotationally, no huge surprises. With Bogey out, it was a 9-man group in both halves. Okongwu was first off the bench in both halves for Capella. Aaron Holiday has he played in both halves. He came in for Trey in the first half, with Trey taking the mid-quarter break in the first quarter. That did not repeat itself in the third quarter. I will say Aaron Holiday struggles with some point guard stuff for sure, despite being the size that he is. Had a pretty bad fast break that he kind of botched in that first quarter. Early entry for AJ Griffin in this game, who's been often staying out of the game until the second quarter. He played earlier in this one and played more in this one because Bogey was out. That makes a lot of sense. And then Jalen Johnson came in, had a huge flying rebound in the first quarter that I definitely wanted to note, and kind of set up some good offense on the floor. But it was 9 guys that played for the Hawks in this spot. Atlanta pushed the lead to as many as 10 late in the first quarter, ended up being up by 6 at the end of the first. And I will say the one thing that plagued the offense really throughout the game was turnovers in a weird way. Usually the Hawks, if you were ranking the Hawks' strengths as a team offensively, turnovers is usually number 1 on the list. They're in the top 3 of the league in turnover rate the last two plus seasons, basically. They were always good at taking the ball. In this game, they were not, and that was there was definitely an issue throughout. It was one of the reasons why the Hawks were not able to go over the finish line in this one. But 10 points each for Trey and Dejounte in the first quarter and playing well. And then defensively, they held the Hornets to less than a point per possession in the first quarter. They forced 4 turnovers. They did a good job contesting shots, and that was good for most of the night until it wasn't at the end. I liked what I saw from AJ Griffin and Jalen Johnson early in the second quarter. Griffin had a very pretty kind of curl 3-pointer and then a couple of nice dribble moves off the bounce to kind of create some separation offensively. Jalen had a catch and shoot 3 that he buried confidently, and then had a great, honestly, a beautiful move to spin through the defense and drop off the pass to Okongwu for a situation where he was fouled. So no assist, but it was a brilliant play by Jalen, and good stuff from the young guys there in that stretch. Still, though, Charlotte hung around in that period. The Hawks had 3 trips in a row that didn't score, and it was only up by 4 points in the middle of the second quarter. They closed very well, though, in the first half. They had a big run when the starters came back in the game with some improved defense, and DeAndre Hunter had a good game in this spot. He made 4 shots in a row from between 9 and 18 feet in about 2 minutes. He was just putting Gordon Hayward in a torture rack. I actually asked DeAndre after the game if there was anything special there. He basically said they were going to run that play until the Hornets stopped it, and they kind of never did. But basically, he was getting into that kind of mid-range, comfortable area. It's not an area that I love necessarily, but when you're open like he was blowing by Hunter, and the Hornets were playing so far back with their bigs that the Hawks had a good opportunity there to kind of exploit that. Hunter made 4 in a row, and he had 13 points in the second quarter and only 8 shots. So a nice night for him overall. The Hawks went up by 11 points late in the first half. Then Trae Young got fouled on what amounted to almost a heave. It wasn't like a pure heave, but it was a makeable shot. But certainly he was rushing at the buzzer in the second quarter. He was fouled on that play. After review, he was still that foul was upheld. He took free throws with 0.4 seconds to go, and then in the middle of that, Steve Clifford, the coach of the Hornets, ended up arguing the call, getting a T. So it was 4 free points for the Hawks in the final minute of the first quarter. That was a nice little break for Atlanta, obviously, to go from up 12 to up by 16 at the half. Obviously, it wasn't enough at the end of the game, but that was a nice little boost at the end of the first half. The Hawks, though, shot well, as they did the entire game, but they had 9 turnovers. That's a weird number, but still, 3 guys scored at least 16 points in the first half. Hunter had 18, Murray 17, Trey 16 plus 6 assists. And that's kind of a rarity. Not every day do you have 3 guys score that many points in a single half of basketball. And defensively, which we'll come back to later on, the Hawks only allowed 49 points on 49 possessions in the first half of this game. Now, in the second half, that changed drastically. And that's one of the reasons why the Hawks were not able to win this game. But in the first half, they're up by 16 at the breaks. Even if you want to kind of ignore the 19 in the second half framing, 16 points at halftime, nice round number there, and not a whole lot of positivity after that. But we'll get into all of what transpired in the second half, as well as my overall observations, some player takeaways, and more. But first, a word from our sponsors on the show today. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you're looking for the DFS option this year, make sure you check out the award-winning app at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love it. I know that you will too. It's so easy to use. I've been playing your PrizePicks for a while now. It's really a lot of fun to play over there, and it's really easy to use all the way across the board. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players. Pick them actually have more or less than a certain number of points, or rebounds, or assists, or steals, etc. And at PrizePicks, win up to 25 times the money on your entry. They have numbers on any sport that you might enjoy. That includes the NBA and college basketball and NFL, college football, MLB, NHL, PGA, soccer, esports, and more. A whole entry can be made just a minute or less. It's that easy and that quick. Plus, it's just you against the projected numbers. It's that straight ahead. And PrizePicks is also safe, and they have fast withdrawals. They're operating in more than 30 states plus Canada at this point, and you can download the PrizePicks app or go to PrizePicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. And first-time users get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. Don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up for the instant deposit match of up to $100 with that promo code LOCKEDON. Check it out now at PrizePicks. Coming out of the halftime break, it's actually kind of a weird situation where Okongwu was listed as questionable to return with left hamstring tightness. He ended up playing a lot in the second half, so I'm not sure if he just got stretched out or whatever happened there, but there's a little bit of a concern that he wasn't going to be able to go. With Capella still limited coming off of the injury, the Hawks might have gone deeper into the bench, but Okongwu came in at a normal time and played the rest of the way. So no concerns, hopefully, knock on wood for that. Keep an eye on that in advance of Monday. Not a great start to the half there, obviously, but immediately, as I know before, the Hawks were up by 19 early in the third quarter. Then, though, everything went towards Charlotte from that point forward. A 7-0 run immediately from the Hornets to get back within 12. Nate called timeout in a hurry. They had 3 possessions in a row that were not great on offense, some pretty sort of stagnant effort on that end of the floor. Then they failed to stop Mason Plumlee. Yes, Mason Plumlee, their center, the Hornets center, from going coast to coast for a dunk. So that was obviously not a great start. Overall, it was a 15-4 run by Charlotte to go from down 19 to down by 8, and the Hawks were very sloppy in the third quarter. I will note now, as I did before, there could be some tired legs here. I'm sure the Hawks were gassed. 5-game win streak, yes, but every game was competitive. There were no total blowouts, and the Hawks were certainly, having played yesterday, I'm sure they were a little bit. They had, I will say, at least a little bit less in the tank than usual. And you don't want to attribute all that to tired legs, but certainly there was some sloppiness, some weird execution stuff that doesn't always happen. There was some ball handling miscues in that stretch as well, which I kind of noted, some turnovers. Anyway, the Hawks were basically up by 19, and then it was down to 3 by the middle of the quarter, with Charlotte kind of just chipping away. It wasn't like a huge run against the backups either. Oftentimes the Hawks' second unit will get them beat. In this game, it was the starters for the most part in that stretch that were out there. And then Okongwu came in a little bit for there, but it was still, the big lead was gone by the time the bench actually came in for the most part in the third quarter. They lost an 8-minute period by 16 points. And if you want to go a little bit more micro versus macro, that was the stretch where the Hawks lost this game. If you want to kind of just boil it down, the Hawks went from having a big lead to not having a lead in about 8 minutes, and circle that one for later on. The Hornets were hot from the floor, etc. Rotationally, same stuff, but a little bit of tweaks along the way. Trey played the entire third quarter. Hunter played the 4 a little bit in the third quarter as well. Otherwise, it was kind of just mimicking the first half, but a little bit less of Jalen Johnson, etc. Aaron Holiday actually hit a big 3 at the end of the third quarter. He definitely has a lot of limitations on offense. I've called him basically a 3-and-D wing player that happens to be 5'10", but he is a pretty good shooter on catch and shoots. He's actually 38.5% over 4 seasons, and he made a nice catch and shoot there. Then Trey had a 3-point play to end the half. So the Hawks scored the last 6 points. It felt like the Hawks were going to be in decent shape. There actually was a terrible challenge, I thought, by the Hornets. Clifford was just frustrated. They called a foul on Trey's drive. Clifford challenged the goaltending call. So basically, they already called the foul. He wasn't challenging the foul. He was challenging the goaltend. Even if he wins that challenge, the best case scenario for the Hornets is Trae Young at the line for two shots. And Trey is a 90% free throw shooter. So basically, the choices, if you're the Hornets there, were 2 points versus 3 points. And yes, that matters, but not enough to challenge in the third quarter. Anyway, we'll get back to challenges later on in this game, obviously. The Hawks, though, were up by 8 at the end of the third. They had a bunch of turnovers, and 15 of them through 3 quarters is obviously really bad. And the big thing was the defense started to let down. The Hornets scored 36 points in the third, and then they had 37 points in the fourth. Trey played the whole third, so they had to go back out with Holiday and Murray in the fourth. It's one of my pet peeves, but they let Aaron initiate some offense early in the fourth quarter. That did not go very well. The Hawks went zone defensively for a little while. It was not as good as it was in the Knicks game. It didn't get them killed, but it certainly didn't stop the bleeding much defensively. And the Hornets had the ball down by 3, and then there was a nice swing toward the Hawks after a big block by Okongwu. Griffin hit a 3. It was back to 6, but that was as big as the lead got again. It was basically 6 or less the entire rest of the way. The Hawks got their 5th foul on John Collins with about 8 minutes to go, and they went small at that point. I didn't love that, but I understood it. And there was a big swing with 7 minutes to go that I also want to circle because Trey had a wide open floater that he always makes, and he missed it, and it led straight to the Hornets scoring to get it back down to 2. If Trey makes that shot, it's 6 again. The lead's kind of comfortable. It didn't go down. They called timeout. They brought Capella back in with 6.5 minutes to go, but only up by 2 points, and it was back and forth from that point forward. Turn the ball over, and then for the first time since it was 10-9 in the first quarter, Rozier hit a 3, and the Hornets were up by 1 point with 6 minutes to go. Nate did challenge a foul momentarily after that would have made it a 4-point play on Rozier. This is very crucial. The Hawks won the challenge, but the 3 still counted. So they ruled that it wasn't a kick out of his legs. And if you watch this game at the end, you will note that this is a big play because Rozier was involved in 3 different plays that were reviewed or at least questioned for kicking out his legs. He was kicking out his legs the entire game. In the first half, there was a play where he actually was called for the offensive foul, but it was an overturn on the floor. And then this play, and then the one at the very end as well. So it was an area that they probably should have been looking for a little bit more. But Nate, that time, won the challenge. But in the NBA, if you don't know this, just because you win a challenge doesn't mean you get another one. You only get one. So that's one of those things where, yeah, there's not really a reward for that. It saved them a point, but obviously later on in the game, probably could use that challenge at the very end. But you never know in that circumstance, but it definitely mattered a lot. There was a 7-2 run after that by the Hawks to go up by 6 again. So the lead was back up to 6. Griffin had a 3. Murray had a nice steal. It felt like the Hawks were in decent shape again, but then the Hornets just kept on making shots, and this is where you have to give them some credit. Obviously, it's always a two-way street in the NBA, and your opponent, even if they're a bad team, as the Hornets are, they're still pros, and they make shots. So Rozier made a pretty big haymaking 3. The Hawks definitely offensively were better in the fourth quarter, but defensively it was not very effective. The Hornets made 2 more threes momentarily after that. They made 10 threes in the second half. That's obviously a lot. And then Trey shot a pretty bad air ball to give the Hornets a 3-point lead in the middle of that. On the ensuing possession, though, there was a bid for Clint Capella to be the hero of the night. So Clint gathered an offensive rebound after a miss by Hunter and got fouled. And Clint obviously has a lot of strengths. One of his biggest weaknesses is free throw shooting, and he went to the line and made both. That was actually a huge spot for Clint. And they got a stop, and then honestly, a wide open 3 for John Collins that I cannot believe didn't go down. It was one of those shots. Like if you watch the replay, the ball goes about as deep into the basket as it possibly could have gone while still popping out. It didn't go in. Nice pass by Trey, good process overall. But the Hawks got to stop. And honestly, it would have been a dagger by Charlotte. So they were only down by 1. Hornets got a pretty good look on a 3, just missed it. And they got the ball to Trey, and they didn't call timeout. And that's something Nate likes to do when Trey's on the floor, especially. It's like they kind of just go in live ball situations. Trey missed a good look at a floater with no timeout, but Capella was right there with his second huge play of the final minute to tip it in for the lead, and the Hawks go up by 1 with 5 seconds to go. So up 1, 5 seconds to go, you're obviously favored to win, and it's one of those things. Coming out of the timeout, the Hawks put in Jalen Johnson for Trae Young defensively, which is totally fine. I would have probably gone to Aaron Holiday in that spot, but I don't blame them for going to Jalen. He's got more size, all that stuff. And then, as you probably know by now, if listening to this podcast, he is called for a 3-shot foul on Terry Rozier with 1.1 seconds to go. As I said a second ago, Rozier was kicking his leg out the entire game. That was a very obvious thing that happened throughout. It happened again here. That kind of helped to draw the call, I think. And I think it was the wrong call. And again, the Hawks did not have a challenge to use in this situation. So some stuff here. Number 1, I think it was I thought it was the wrong call. Is it the worst call in history? No, it's not. But it's not a good call. It's obviously very magnified because of the time. I think if you, it'll be interesting to see what the last 2-minute report says. But at the end of the day, nobody really cares about that. It doesn't actually change anything. I think it would have been maybe overturned on a challenge if they had one, but clearly you can't be too mad about that either. I don't think also, I don't want to blame all of it on the refs. I don't think Jalen played it very well. There was some contact at the very top. Hand versus hand is fine. You can do that. That's kind of one of those misconceptions that's out there. I think Jalen did not do a perfect closeout by any means. I think Nate was asked about this. by me actually, about the final call there by the referees. And he basically said he was told that it was contact at the top of the release. So we'll see. But no matter what, it's a brutal moment to lose on. Jalen didn't do a great job there. I think you never want to have it be in the hands of the referee. They made the call. I didn't like the call. I thought it was the wrong call. But the Hawks dug themselves into that hole the entire way. Again, this game should have been over by then. So it's both. It's not a sexy answer, but like somebody asked me flat out, like, what's a bigger reason why the Hawks lost? The late foul call or the collapse? And it's like, well, the answer just has to be both. I can't even pick one. I guess maybe if you had to choose one, it would be the collapse, because it was more of a big collapse there by 19 points. And you can't just let one play decide your game. But it was brutal, obviously, just unlucky, bad execution all the way around. And that was the play they lost on for the most part. So last thing here, Rozier goes to the line and makes all three. That was big as well. So that put the Hawks down by 2 with about a second remaining. They call timeout, of course. They had 2 remaining. So they call one. They get out to set up the play, and Nate called timeout kind of immediately, the second one, before they had a chance to run much of an action. So that was not my favorite thing in the world. Then after the timeout, second timeout, I should say, they got a 5-second call for the inbound violation. So I didn't love having Trae Young throw the ball in. That's been a controversial thing the Hawks have done a few times in recent days. Nate was asked about that by Lauren Williams of the AJC, and he said that he wanted to have his best passer inbound the ball, and he wanted to get the ball to Dejounte or Hunter coming off the screen. I don't have a huge problem with that, but the way that the play unfolded, Trae is dealing with Mason Plumlee jumping in front of him, who's obviously a large man. And I will say it's a low percentage situation in that spot, because yes, you have a chance to get a shot off, but it has to be perfect. You're down 2, and the one time that I thought they could got probably the ball to Murray was in a dead sprint away from the rim. So even if he gets the ball there to Murray has to catch it and basically shoot a Kobe turnaround, like 180-degree turnaround from 20 feet falling out of bounds. Like, he might have made that, but it's a very difficult shot. The other one, like, I thought there was a moment where Hunter might have come open as well, but no matter what, like, it's a tightrope in that situation. There wasn't like a great perfect lob play that they've had executed before. Like, everything was going to sort of be a jump shot, and didn't happen. So 5-second call, and the game is over basically at that point. And, sort of go on from there. So I don't know. There's so much to talk about from this game. Like, it's one of those situations where nobody's happy at the end of this one. The feedback from the players and the coaches, on the dais and all that stuff, nobody was thrilled. I saw walk-off interviews. It is what it is. Like, nobody's happy. But it's not just one play ever, and it's not just one segment of the game. We'll get into the offense in a second, defense in a second. But second half defense was terrible. Offensively, it was stagnant at the end of the game. The Hawks did shoot the ball well in this game, but the turnovers were a problem. It was a lot of stuff rolled into one. And one thing is for sure, even if you are trying to take an even-handed approach like I try to do on this podcast, and you have to at least mention that the Hawks were the team that had the disadvantage rest-wise in this game. Even with all that said, you cannot blow a 19-point lead in the second half against a bad team in your home building. All those things. Yes, you had a rest disadvantage. That does matter. Yes, the Hornets made a bunch of shots. That does matter. But the Hawks, flat out, you cannot lose this game up 19 in the third quarter. It's just one of those things. And they would all admit that. I'm sure even with every caveat available, they would all note, like, you can't lose this game. And they lost it. It's 1 out of 82. It is what it is. But obviously a sour taste at the end of a heck of a week for the Hawks. Really a week plus for the Hawks before this. All right, we'll get into my takeaways in a second about the offense and the defense and all the stats and all that stuff from this game. But first, a word from our sponsors on the podcast today. The NFL playoffs are here. We are very excited about our new sports betting partner, the Locked On Podcast Network, because they're the number 1 sportsbook in America, and that is FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports so fun and so easy. New customers can join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all the favorite bets that you're looking for, from money lines to point spreads to totals, game props, player props, and much more. Plus, you can combine them all together for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. The NFL playoffs are still rolling with a handful of games everyone's talking about right now, honestly, and the Hawks also have games on Monday and Wednesday coming up this week to gauge and monitor with FanDuel. All you have to do to get into all of the safe action is check it out at FanDuel.com or in the FanDuel app, and it's safe and secure and super easy to use. Football fans, basketball fans, don't miss out on this. Place your first $5 bet and get $150 free in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, and shouts to my folks at FanDuel for becoming the new sponsor, of course, at this point in time. But we will turn our attention now to the takeaways. And really, the second half was hugely tilted towards Charlotte. Clearly, on the scoreboard, that's very obvious. It was 73-53 in the second half. So the Hawks lost by 20 after halftime. Yikes. The Hornets had a 140-ish offensive rating in the second half. And this is a Hornets team that I have to note, they're terrible on offense. Like, they're terrible. They were coming into the night second worst in the league in offensive rating, and they have been the worst team in the league without LaMelo Ball offensively. So to have that team put up 1.4 points per possession against you in a half is not good. They did make 10 threes. Some of that's a hat tip to them, but 4 turnovers, 73 points. The Hawks shot the ball fine in the second half, but they did nothing on the offensive glass, turnover battle, all that stuff, and the result was not the one you want. So overall, the offense really cratered after halftime. They ended up with a 111 offensive rating for the game, a 125 or so in the first half. So I'm looking up now to see if it's been updated since I started recording this podcast. But really, I can tell you this with very much certainty, the Hawks' offense in the second half was not good, not effective necessarily, really at all. So yeah, I have it now. Yeah, the Hawks scored exactly a point per possession in the second half. There's your game right there. Now, defensively, it was also bad. It was, again, about 1 point, about a 140. But offensively, it was just as bad after halftime. They shot the ball very well in the game. I'll say that. If you're looking at the box score, you'll probably be baffled that the Hawks lost this game because this is their shooting splits in the game: 34% from the floor, 44% from three, and 85% at the line. You are not going to lose many games in the NBA if you shoot the ball like that. And yes, overall, the shooting was really good. Even if they didn't take a lot of threes, they ended up with like a 61% EFG in this game. That's an elite figure. But everything else was bad, basically, for Atlanta in this game. So offensive rebounding wise, basically nothing after the first half. Below average for the game, nothing in the second half. Free throw creation, below average. 18 turnovers. That's a number that the Hawks just cannot afford. The Hawks are awesome taking care of the ball. They average about 12.5 per game. 18 that led to 21 points for the Hornets. So essentially nothing was good for Atlanta other than shot making. And look, the Hawks did shoot the ball well in this game. Even with the Hornets forcing them into a bunch of floater range shots and mid-range shots, the Hawks were 25 of 45 between 4 feet and 3-point line. That is a ridiculous number of volume. Like, you don't love that process, but because the Hornets play defense like that, they definitely try to make you take those shots, and the Hawks made them. It wasn't like I can complain about process issues, but the Hawks made those shots in this game. It's just that nothing else beyond the shooting went well for the offense, ball movement-wise, etc. So defensively, again, the Hornets are terrible on offense, unfortunately. But for the full game, even if you want to give the entire broad context, a 121 or so offensive rating is really bad to allow to this Hornets team. They were hot from three in the second half. They made 10 threes. But for the game, it wasn't like it was one of those like bludgeonings from 3-point range. Like, coming into the night, if you told me that the Hawks got blitzed by the Hornets offense, I would have guessed it was the Hornets being super hot from three. And yeah, they were in the second half. But for the game, they were 13 of 34. That's like pretty good, 38%. It's not crazy by any means. The Hornets also didn't get to the line a ton, only 22 attempts. But it was 28 assists for Charlotte. The Hawks losing the turnover battle to the Hornets by 6 is not good. They took this is one of those things that I love to point out, but the Hornets won the possession battle. The Hornets took 6 more shots than the Hawks did and 2 more free throws than the Hawks did. In a 4-point game, that's a huge thing. So it wasn't super lopsided, but the Hawks, after winning the possession battle by a lot on Friday against the Knicks, they lost it in this game, and it's one of those simple things that can kind of swing a game, and it's swing a game in this spot. So the player evaluations, we'll kind of fly through these a little bit on this podcast with nine guys playing. Jalen Johnson had a below-average game, 0 points and 3 shots. I thought it was fine process-wise. Like, he took one probably shaky look, but the 1 attempt was a good look. 5 rebounds. Had an assist. I thought he played okay. He was fine. +3 in 9 minutes. Aaron Holiday, offensively, doesn't give you much. He did have the 1 catch-and-shoot 3. Did have an assist as well. Had a steal and a block. Defensively, he helped them out in this spot in a small sample size, 15 minutes. Griffin had a good game, I thought. 23 minutes, 13 points on 7 shots. Made all 3 of his threes. That's very helpful without Bogey. Obviously, 5 rebounds and an assist for AJ. Defensively, probably below average, but it is what it is. 3 assists for Griffin. I was looking at the wrong line. 3 assists for AJ in this game. Okongwu, 3 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 blocks. I thought he was okay. He was not as good as he has been in the last week plus, but that's okay. Like, he only took 1 shot, which is a little bit kind of weird for Okongwu. He actually played a large stint in the second half, despite the injury. I wonder if he was 100% in the second half, but we'll come back to that later on if we need to. Capella played 24 minutes, made all 5 of his shots and two free throws at a big time. And again, he would have been kind of the hero of the game at the end of the game after the free throws and the tip-in. 12 points, 9 rebounds, 2 steals and a block. He looked good. He's been playing really well since he came back. Obviously, the Hawks are going to look to have him play a little bit more as he gets settled back in, but a back-to-back's tough for him, playing both sides of it. But he's been good since he came back, so that's very helpful. He was +8 in a game they lost by 4. So there you go. Collins, foul trouble was the problem for him in the second half. He had 6 fouls. He fouled out at the very, very end of the game. Only took 7 shots, had 11 points, 5 rebounds. Defensively, he was pretty decent, I thought, around the rim, but wasn't like he was an absolute best game by him. He was probably like a C- game, C+ game, something like that. Hunter had a huge first half. 13 points in the second quarter, ended up with 25 and 4 rebounds, 2 assists. Didn't do a whole lot like in the floor game, but did make shots. He was 8 of 11 on 2s, 2 of 5 on 3s, and his scoring game has been pretty impressive in recent days. And then Trey and Dejounte. So Trey, I thought, was worse today than he had been in the last few games. It wasn't terrible, but he was pressing a little bit, I thought, in the second half. It felt like at times. He was only 9 of 18 on 2s is actually fine for him, but 0 of 4 from 3. That's the line 9 times. Had 12 assists, 6 turnovers. He wasn't bad, but defensively wasn't quite as locked in as he had been in previous games. Just not quite as good. I thought he was still fine, but not sort of glowing like he had been in the last few games. Murray has been so hot. That was still the case in this game. As a shooter, he took 20 shots, made 11 of them, 6 threes, made 4 of them. In the last 5 games, he's scored 20 points or more in 5 straight. That's the 3rd longest streak of his career per Hawks BR. And in those 5 games, Murray is shooting 60% from the floor and 18 of 33 from 3. Now, that is unsustainable. Obviously, Murray's not going to shoot like that. He never has in his career, but he has been really hot. And honestly, if the Hawks had won this game, he probably would have had a claim on Player of the Week status in the Eastern Conference, but we'll see. He wasn't as good in this game as he was in the previous games either, and it's sort of directly tied to the result, I think. But nobody was terrible for the Hawks in this game. It's just that nobody had that full-on standout performance that they've been having in recent days. Murray shot the ball well again, but that was kind of it. And we'll emerge now with how sort of the way this transpired. But a frustrating game for sure for Atlanta. As I said before, it wasn't one play. It was a collapse. Yes. It was a controversial call. Yes. It was maybe the Hawks were due for one of these kind of performances as well. And the Hornets did play pretty well by their standards. But at the end of the day, you cannot lose this game, and the Hawks know that. And it sort of extinguishes a little bit of the optimism that was happening. I will say, I was probably accused of being too low on the Hawks last night, I'm sure. This is not a reason to panic. It's one of those games that will get you over the course of 82 games. And the Hawks are still in totally fine shape. But 1-1 over the last 2 games is not too bad. 5-1 over the last 6 is not too bad. But you want to get that game at home, and losing to the Hornets in that building is frustrating to be sure. All right, from here, the Hawks travel to Chicago, where they play the Bulls on Monday evening. It's an 8 o'clock start. Interesting test for the Bulls, actually, because the Bulls last played on Thursday afternoon in Paris. So they'll be flying back. Maybe the more well-rested team despite international travel, because Paris isn't that far away and they haven't played since Thursday, but we'll see how that all transpires. The Bulls are an okay basketball team. They're not great by any means. They are 21-24, but a road game against a team that has some rest, and a nice little challenge for the Hawks on the road on Monday before they actually return to the floor again on Wednesday on the road in OKC. So plenty to get to coming up on the podcast, but it's been a busy week. We've done 6 shows in the last 6 days. It's been sort of wall-to-wall coverage in this space. Please subscribe to the podcast on your platform of choice: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Odyssey, Google Play. We're also on YouTube if you like the video product that we put out there as well. Do it across platforms. Multiple downloads is always encouraged, for sure. Please follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me on Twitter at BT Rowland. Support our sponsors and our new sponsor, FanDuel, on today's show. And we'll see you all after the game on Monday.